Okay, so we're going to start with review. The last two chapters that we did were chapters 12 and 13. I put them together. And so let's see what we remember. All right, who was responsible for tending the lamps? The priest. Very good. Okay, right. So why is that important for us to know that the priests were the ones tending the lamps? What did we correlate that to? Yeah, so making sure that we know we're responsible for trimming our lamps. God's not going to trim our lamp for us, right? How is the oil for the lampstand produced? What does oil have to go through before it becomes oil? Yeah, crushing, pressing, beating. So talked about how Jesus, he was beaten so that the oil, the Holy Spirit, could come forth. And then the last thing that we talked about was, what is the difference between a lampstand and a candlestick? Why was he specific to say a lampstand and not a candlestick?
Candlestick is like self-sufficient.
Pastor L submitted his quiz. And he made a
like 3 or 4 others.
He made a 100.
It's fresh on my mind.
That is correct. A candlestick is self-consumption. So the point behind that was that a candle will burn out, right? But a lampstand, more oil can be produced. Now you got to go through crushing and pressing and beating, but more oil can be produced. I can't produce another candle, right? Okay, so we don't want to burn ourselves out. We want to make sure that we're getting refilled with the oil. Okay, so this chapter is the next to last place in the tabernacle of Moses. So we're looking at the altar of incense. So this is still in the holy place. It's right in front of the veil that takes you into the most holy place. And I want to read this quote from the book. This is how he opens the chapter, and this is just so good to me. He says, "When I'm leading worship, I'm reaching to take the hand of God, and then I'm reaching out to take the hand of the bride, then drawing their hands together and stepping out of the way." I love that imagery because when we are worshiping, that's the whole point. We create that atmosphere and that environment for the people to commune with God, right? It's not about them worshiping us. It's not about us at all. It's just creating that opportunity, creating that space for the bride and the groom to be able to commune together. So the altar of incense. Okay, so let's talk about, first of all, the construction, because there's some importance to that. So the altar of incense was constructed from a 4-square box, and it was made of acacia wood, which we've heard that before, right? And it was covered in gold, and we've heard that as well before. So I think what's interesting, the wood from the altar was used to represent Jesus's humanity. And then it was covered in gold to represent his deity. So both at the same time, right? Because he was God and he was man. And then on the top of the altar, on the 4 corners, in gold, there were 4 horns around the altar. And so, you've heard the scripture that said they would grab a hold of the horns of the altar. Once a year, the priest would apply blood to the horns as a sacrifice for the sins of the people. So here's the part that it just gets gooder and gooder. So the altar of incense, of course, it was to burn incense. Okay, so this is not the same thing as the altar that would burn the sacrifices, right? This was specifically for the incense. Okay, and here's the thing. It wasn't just any kind of incense. Like the priests didn't go to their local store and purchase this incense. This wasn't just anything that you could pick up anywhere. This incense was created specifically for the altar of incense, and the Lord instructed the priest how to mix it together, what to use to create it. And it was used for no other purpose. It was sacred incense. So they didn't get to take this home and burn it at home or anything like that. It was holy. And it would be burned twice a day. They would burn it in the morning, and then they would burn it in the evening. And it was so much of an honor / danger to be selected as the priest to burn the incense night and day that the priest would cast lots to say, okay, who's burning the incense today? And so according to the lots, whoever it fell to, that's who would go and burn the incense for the day. But the importance of the altar of incense is that God promised, that's where I will speak to the people. That's where I'm going to speak to the priest for the people. So, the story that we hear of Zacharias, John the Baptist's father. Whenever the Gabriel met him, that's where he met him, at the altar of incense. He was standing at the altar of incense, the place where God promised that he would speak to the people. So what is the whole purpose? What is the symbolism behind the altar of incense? So the altar of incense represents burning, passionate prayers of the people of God. So as that incense is going forth, you can think about the prayers going forth. But here's the thing. Incense only works when it's set to flame. If you just have incense in and of itself, it just looks like a pile of dirt. That's what he compared it to. He said, there's different ways that you can have incense. It could be like in a cone, or it can be formed a certain way. But at the end of the day, it just looks like a pile of dirt. So until it is set to flame, that's when it actually becomes useful. That's when it's put to use. So that's the same way as prayer. Prayer only rises when it burns. Worship only rises when it burns. And you can't try to take an old fire and light it. It has to be a new fire. Why did they have to burn the incense twice a day? Why couldn't just that one time do? And why couldn't one time do for a month? No, it had to be every single day. So it was a new, okay, God, I'm bringing you something new. I'm bringing you something fresh. I'm not relying on the old fire. I'm not going to rely on my old prayers. I'm not going to rely on my old worship. No, this is something new that I bring to you. Now, here's the thing. We know the enemy, right? Everything that God creates, the enemy has a counterfeit for, right? He takes what God has created and he perverts it, okay? So I'm going to read from the book the way he said it, okay? So you guys we've all heard of strange fire, right? Okay, well, he breaks it down so well, so I'm just going to read what he said. Everything God does, the flesh tries to counterfeit. Passion is no different. Powerful prayer is ignited by God. Powerful intercession is inspired by God. We cannot manufacture the fire that leads people to worship God. His Spirit must draw people to communion and empower them with the gifts and fruit of the Spirit, and then lead them into the burning intercession of the priesthood. If the fire is man-made, it is an abomination. It must be sustained by human methods, which will eventually fail. God's fire is sustained by intimacy with God's heart. And then he goes on to say at the end of this section, man-made fire does nothing but wound the children of God. It is manipulative. The word manipulative means to work something with our hands. It means to turn something with our own strength. God will not cooperate with manipulation. As soon as we get our hands on something, God will take his hands off. And we are left with the weight and the responsibility of carrying it all by ourselves. But if we will entrust ourselves to the hands of God and let him work by his Spirit, he can do mighty things through our hands. And so that's why it's so important that strange fire is not lifted up. When I heard that, when he said that strange fire is manipulative, what does that sound like? Sounds like witchcraft to me. And I don't want to be trying to offer up some form of witchcraft in the presence of a holy God. You know, he's graceful, because had the priest done that, they'd be dead, right? You'd be dragging them out by that rope. I think about, the sons of Korah, and how that they tried to offer strange fire, because the whole point was they weren't doing it God's way, right? So when we try to take things and do them our way, that's when we create this strange fire. So, but sometimes we see things burning. He mentioned earlier in the chapter, he said, you can see like worship goes forth, but you don't feel anything because there's no fire. Where's the incense? Like, did you came and like the incense is there, but where's the fire that causes that incense to lift up, right? And so I just thought that was so powerful, that the altar of incense, first of all, there is a particular distinct incense that God is looking for. He's looking for worshipers who will worship him in spirit and in truth, right? I think about that being like the incense. And Pastor L said it so well a couple of weeks or months ago when he said we have to have both, right? You can't just try to worship from the spirit or just worship from the truth. No, we need both to merge together. And so let's just remember that, as we're worshiping, that I can't rely on my old fire. I got to bring something new. I've got to make sure that I'm bringing new worship. I'm bringing fresh prayer, and then making sure that we don't put our hands on it and let God do with it what he will, because he will do so much more with it than we ever could, right? And we don't want to, we don't want our worship to be manipulative. We don't want to manipulate people into serving God. We want them to serve God because it's the desire of their heart, because his spirit has drawn them. With loving kindness, I have drawn them, not manipulation, right? And so let's just remember that. Just kind of meditate on this chapter throughout the rest of the week.